Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. You are about to listen to episode number 150 of the weekly podcast called Hooked on Wooden Boats. Welcome to the podcast today, folks. My name is Dan Matson, also known as Wooden Boat Dan. It's great to have you on board today. This is the very first podcast in the world, and I think it's still the only podcast that's fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden boats around the world. And that's our focus here, folks, is strictly wooden boats, although occasional fiberglass boat sneaks in, but it's mostly wood, so all is good there. Thanks for tuning in today. Great to have you on board the good ship Hooked on Wooden Boats. We have an action-packed and fun episode planned as usual in this weekly podcast. Today's featured segment is an interview I did with Colin Angus back in September at the Wooden Boat Festival in Port Townsend, Washington. Colin and I had hooked up a month earlier at the, what's it called? Oh my goodness. The Pocket Yacht Palooza, and I did an interview there, and he kind of did an overview of his biography of his life as an adventurer and boat guy. That was episode number 139. If you want to go there, you can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/139. Colin was Adventurer of the Year in 2007. So anyway, I hooked up with him during the festival, and we talked about some specific adventures that he's done and really kind of got into the details of those and had a great time as usual. Colin's an awesome guy, lives up in Canada. I think he's in Victoria, BC. Grew up on Vancouver Island. Really fascinating guy, done some really cool stuff. And, of course, one of the things he has done is develop I don't know if he's developed it, but he's refined it, a row cruising boat. So it's a boat that you can row that you can also stay aboard at night. It's got a little berth, cabin enclosure for one person to sleep in, and he's selling kits for these now. And also there's going to be a class in the spring in Port Townsend on building one of these boats. So it's pretty cool stuff. So stick around for that interview. I think you're going to like it. As far as what's happening with me, we got my son married off last weekend, which is really awesome. I set up the 100-year-old siding backdrop that I built here at home, which is basically an 8x8 display that stood vertically behind the bride and the groom during the ceremony. And it came out really cool. Got a lot of great compliments on it. It was really a fun project. So set that up in the church on Thursday, tore it down Friday after the wedding, brought it home, dismantled it, and stored the wood because I will use that for some other purposes. It's really awesome looking stuff. As I've mentioned before, my next step is to get my garage organized, get my scamp in the garage and start working on it. Now that the weather's gotten cold, I need to install a heater in the garage, and I've actually got one. Actually, the heater is a freestanding unit. I just have to wire in a 220 outlet that I can plug it into, clean up the garage a little bit more, then I can pull the scamp in and start working on it. So that's what I'm going to be doing over here over the next couple of weeks. Thanksgiving's next week, so wow, the holidays are upon us. I'd like to give a shout out to our new subscribers to the electronic newsletter that's almost monthly. Dave Clements, Richard Kincaid, Steve Baum, Paul Western, and John Starkey. Thanks for signing up for the newsletter. I'm getting way behind on the newsletter. I apologize. This is November 19th when I'm recording this. I do promise to do a newsletter this month. because I don't think I've done one since September, so it's been a couple months. So I will do a newsletter this month. If you'd like to subscribe to the electronic newsletter, it's free. Go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe and give me your name and email address, and you're good to go. Today's podcast is brought to you by Duckworks Boat Building Supply. Duckworks is a family-owned business in Harper, Texas. Chuck and Sandra Lyon Weber started this business in 1999. They sell all kinds of stuff online for boating. They sell epoxies, resins, glues, tools, boat gear, boat plans, custom-made sails that are made in the United States, rope, compasses, fiberglass cloth, anchors, you name it. They sell just about the whole gamut of things that you could want, especially if you're building or repairing a small wooden boat. They've got it there. They also publish a magazine online called Duckworks Magazine that's been going for almost 15 years with all kinds of great articles about boat building and boat designs and related topics. I would encourage you to check out their website and make some purchases. They have really fair prices and great customer service. The easiest way to get to their website is go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/duck, D-U-C-K. Again, that's hookedonwoodenboats.com/duck. Please go check it out. Tell them I sent you over there and make some purchases. They're good people, and they'll take care of you, so check it out. We're going to move on to the interview with Colin Angus now of Victoria, British Columbia. So take it away, Colin. Okay, it's September 7th, 2014. I'm with Colin Angus. Colin, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, we hooked up a few weeks ago and kind of did an overview, kind of a biography of your life, I guess you could say, in 30 minutes. That's kind of a short period to cover that, but we're here, and it's kind of the end of the festival. We just saw the sail by, and lots of cool stuff happening. But we thought maybe I'd have you talk about your first real adventure in life of boating. I guess you could say it was a boating adventure, and kind of expand upon that. We talked about it a little bit last time, but that kind of launched you into doing other things. So tell us about that.
Okay, well, my first adventure was very pivotal. It sort of was a real eye-opener. It allowed me to see the world from a very different perspective, because I was quite a young guy when I did that. It was a dream I had from when I was 12 years old. I read a book about Robin Lee Graham, who's the youngest to sail around the planet back in the early 70s. And I was so inspired. I thought, that would be really cool to actually get out in a boat. It was just, such a romantic way that he regaled the tale in his book. So I started, I didn't have any means to actually learn how to sail, because, I didn't have any sailing friends, and I was brought up by a single mom with 4 kids, so there's very little money in Port Alberni, and sailing just doesn't really happen in Port Alberni back then anyway. So I really didn't have any physical sailing experience beforehand. It was all sort of in my head. I was reading all the books in the local library, which are very old school books, quite dated. So I had quite an old school perspective on sailing. That was my only knowledge. And then a friend, his name was Dan Adet, who I met in grade 11, became very excited about this idea. So we started planning the trip together. So after graduating from high school, we
started planning in junior year in high school.
Yeah, while we were in high school, yeah. And so shortly after graduating, we bought I worked on a fish boat and tree planting to get my funds for it, and Dan was working dishwashing and in a museum. So we got saved up enough money to buy a beat up old 27-foot sailing boat. And we took a 3-day sailing course, and then we sailed away from Vancouver Island.
Really?
So a lot of
3 days under your belt.
3 days, and then with the boat we bought, we had another few weeks of practice around in the more sheltered waters in the Georgia Strait. So it was a totally new experience to sail out past Nia Bay and out into the open Pacific. Where a couple of young kids never been in anything like that in their lives before, to have this big swell, and it was quite windy. So we sailed, our plan was to sail non-stop down to San Francisco. We thought, okay, we don't have a lot of experience, it's probably safer to stay well out from all the shoals and the bars. And so we came into San Francisco, and we were...
So you did go straight down to Frisco?
Yeah, straight down to Frisco, and we had very little money. We each had $200 left when we departed. And,
my goodness.
I don't come from the kind of family where there's any chance of a bailout if you run out of money. So it's time to top up the kitty and to get some luxuries like a life raft and a self-steering vane. We were just steering all the way down, very sick and tired of steering by the time we got to San Francisco.
My goodness.
So we were doing boat work, varnishing and painting in some of the boats
in San Francisco.
So,
make money.
Yeah. We did that for a couple of months. Again, learning all the time because again we're quite naive young guys. The whole process of varnishing, people showing us the details behind it all. But we were enthusiastic students. And eventually we saved up enough money to get a steering vane, a life raft, some more safety equipment, and a little bit of extra money to tide us forward. But that whole trip, in total, I spent 5 years sailing. Dan and I, after, I was trying to think, it must have been about a year and a half of cruising. We were in French Polynesia. We got jobs on a luxury yacht as deckhands, and I worked in that for 9 months. And Dan stayed on permanently, so I bought out his half of our sailing boat and was single-handing from there on. And so it was, I went through all the different South Pacific islands, Tonga, Fiji, New Caledonia, and then down to Australia. And I counted the other day how many different jobs I did on that trip. And I think it was 23 different, just working in different places, keeping the kitty continually topped up, from grave digging in New Zealand and picking kiwis in Australia. I worked in Subway restaurant and was also fruit picking there and vegetable picking, driving tractors in the cane fields. In French Polynesia, both Dan and I were working in this small little resort, just doing, painting and other little sort of.
Was that kind of fun to do all that?
Oh, I loved it. That was
the local people.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You really get to. Every place we go to, we suddenly feel almost like we're locals. We're going, working and getting to meet the people, and there's something different when you go to a place with a lot of money. And you're just kind of spending your way along, as opposed to arriving there and feeling, you've got a challenge ahead of you, and that's to top up your funds once again. And so you're forced to sort of really immerse yourself, talk to people, figure out where you're going to work, how you're going to work. It's not always entirely legitimate. But so for me, that was all part of the experience. So 5 years of just really immersing myself in a lot of different places. And again, going back to that little kid in Port Alberni where I was raised, and it was such just suddenly seemed the whole world was your oyster, as opposed to when I was a kid we didn't really travel because there just wasn't money to travel. So I knew the Port Alberni very well, but not a whole lot else. So it was, I just loved that whole experience of sailing and exploring.
Yeah. So. Give me some more details on the trip as far as some of the real highlights for you and places, your favorite places along the way and stuff like that.
So I think the highlight there's a few highlights, but one of the biggest was when we left Mexico. It took us 33 days of sailing nonstop to French Polynesia, and for Dan and myself, that's of course the longest we'd been out at sea for up until that point. So it was just so exciting, and for me, the sort of idea, the symbol behind the whole trip that I was planning was reaching the tropics. I always, from when I was a little kid, just dreamed of the idea of, and back then it was like 21 years ago, so travel wasn't quite as, now everyone's traveling all the time, for a 2-week vacation to Hawaii or whatever it may be, but back then, people didn't travel as much as a whole, and then we traveled a lot less than average. So to me, the tropics almost seemed like this magical place that, is very difficult to get to, and so I was always dreaming of it, just thinking of, reading about it, and, I knew what was there, but I had these images in my head, but to suddenly, arrive in French Polynesia and have the smells of the frangipani flowers wafting across the water and all these tropical fruits that were so tasty.
80-degree water or whatever it is.
Yeah, leaping into that water, and it's warm. That's an experience I'd never had before. In Mexico it's warmish because we were in Mexico before we left, but nothing like that. And the people, we really, again, really got to meet the local people. I remember some locals that befriended us, and they were taking us spearfishing for crayfish up this creek, and we spent, it was many hours. I remember I was just like marveling at how resilient these guys were, because I thought we were going to, stop and eat somewhere or whatever. Hour after hour after hour, I was just ravenous. But
really?
And the skill they had to get these crayfish, because of course you have that refraction with the light in the water, so they're not really where you notice it. And Dan and I think we got about 2, and they just filled up a bucket. But it's those kind of things. And then they invited us in for dinner after, and the crayfish, and we really got to hang out with the local people and get to see what their lifestyle was like, and it was for me all part of that magical experience of just arriving in the tropics.
Was French Polynesia your favorite place along that trip?
It was one of my favorite. I mean, there's other places that were equally, magic, but just because that was the first sort of, radically different experience to, my own, realm of experiences in the past. So it was pretty magical. I mean, I love, there's all sorts of intriguing. I remember, Tonga was quite neat. The whole geography there, the way you've got the big limestone cliffs, which is quite. At that point, I'd been sailing for quite a while in the South Pacific, and so normally with the whole, you've either got the volcanic sort of mountains rising out, or you've got the coral atolls which are very low. Whereas there you have neither. You've actually got because of the interesting what's happened is the plate is lifted up, so they were low-lying atolls, and then lifted hundreds of meters into the air, so maybe not quite hundreds, but hundreds of feet into the air, and so creating a very different sort of environment than I'd seen before, which was quite unique. And then Australia and New Zealand, they were great places too. Just Australia's got so much in the way of rich flora and fauna, many things that'll bite and kill you.
Right.
Yeah, I worked quite a bit. I spent almost a year in Australia and a year in New Zealand.
You go up the Great Barrier Reef that area?
Yeah. It was right all the way up I sailed up, I arrived in Brisbane, then went up the Great Barrier Reef all the way up to Cairns, and then back down to Sydney, and then from Sydney across to New Zealand. And
just curious if you made a stop in the Marshall Islands.
I didn't actually. No, too far south for that. But
I was there for a few months one time, so I've met some other people that have sailed and have stopped there.
Yeah, it's a good. I think especially if you're going like through Hawaii, it ends up being
kind of on the way.
Yeah.
Right. So what was it? So on that trip, you started out with your buddy Dan. You guys were sharing the duty of sailing the boat, and then you took off in single-handed. What was that like to go from two hands to single?
Yeah.
What did you learn through that?
It was very different. I mean, it's much more lonely, of course. You're by yourself. And, Dan and I got along really well, so it was always fun to sort of have that camaraderie and, jovial sort of, and also somebody to share your experiences with.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it was kind of, you become, a little more introspective. Your mind's wandering a lot more because you are on your own. And it does certainly make you appreciate when you, reach landfall. So you've been out at sea for 10 days all by yourself, and so you're almost seeking out company. So I found I became almost more social when Dan wasn't on board. I mean, not that we were pretty social as it was. We loved, but certainly go to lengths to meet other people. When you get to shore. And it was funny. I think just of Dan and myself when we arrived in French Polynesia, again, our money, it was depleted. We had almost no. The funny thing is, you weren't back then. It's probably the same now. I don't know, but they because they'd had many penniless sailors, or a few at least penniless sailors, kind of run aground and ruin their boats, and they didn't have the money to fly out. The government has had to pay for their departure, so they didn't want that to happen anymore. So instead, you have to post a bond, which is equivalent to what a flight back home would be. And we knew this, and we didn't have that money, but we'd heard on the grapevine that when you arrive in the Marquesas, because it's the more remote part of French Polynesia, they don't have credit card processing facilities. So if you say that you want to pay with a credit card, they'll give you a temporary cruising permit, which is actually a couple months long, and then you pay when you get to Papeete. So our plan was, okay, we're going to go there, we're going to say we want to pay with a credit card. We didn't even possess credit cards, and then we'd depart from Papeete. So of course, because we're leaving, we're not going to have to pay the post the bond. But this is all in theory, so we're really quite frightened. 33 days on the ocean, and you're arriving in port. You dream that you've had all your life, and you know that there's a potential that you may be booted out. We don't have any money. We run out of food. And so we arrived in the little village and went up to the gendarme's office, which was procedure for clearing, and we'd sort of rehearsed it a few times. And so pulling out our passports. My friend Dan spoke French, so that was a big benefit. And he said, okay, and I looked at all our paperwork, and he's like, you know about the bond? We're like, yeah. And Dan said, yeah, we're just going to pay with credit card. And he reached into his pocket, And he's like, no, we can't process credit cards, but I'll give you a temporary permit. So it worked out just as we hoped, but it was very scary. But we had no money. So
we had to go back out to see if...
Oh, I don't know what would have happened. Yeah, I mean...
He might still be out there.
Yeah, I might still be out there. So within a few days, luckily, we were able to get some work under the table with a French lady who had a small little... it wasn't a resort, but more like a hotel. They called it a resort, but it's just like a little hotel by the water, and we were painting, and I sold my mountain bike to one of the local guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so we saved enough money to continue on, but we're still pretty broke. And then we got to Moorea. This is after several months of cruising through this. We went to what do you call that other band of islands? The low line. Anyway, we were spending a lot of time sailing. And we got to Moorea, and there's a luxury yacht. We didn't know what it was. From the distance, we thought it was a town. We're looking at our charts going, oh, there's no town there. And as we got closer, we realized there was a big of the lights of this we're all on in this yacht.
Really?
Very fancy ship owned by John Kluge, who was at the time the 8th richest person in the world. So we anchored behind this boat. We've got this, crummy looking, decrepit fiberglass boat. We had our tender, we called it the deflatable because it was so haggard. We bought that secondhand in San Francisco that one of us was continually pumping with the pump while the other rowed. It wouldn't even hold air long enough. So we were rowing past the stern of this yacht while the captain was having his shower. And he starts chatting to us, and one of us is sitting there pumping away, pump, as the conversation ensues.
That's
and
funny.
He's asking about our trip, and I think he was quite charmed by it. And he said, "Oh, would you guys be interested in doing some day work, deckhanding?" And we were just so thrilled. And he was offering, I think it was like $12 an hour for each of us. And we were the French lady we were working for. We were getting $3 an hour from her. So it was like, oh yeah, and so we were so excited. So we started working there, just day working, and then they hired us on full time as deckhands. So we traveled from there to Australia, where the boat was overhauled, and then up to Hong Kong, and that's where that was 9 months later. I then bought out Dan's half of our boat and went back to sailing.
So you had to learn some single-handed skills when you...
Yeah, I mean...
When Dan left, was that a lot different or not?
No, not really, as far as because we had the Aries steering vane, so that's the big thing. And because it's a smaller boat, generally one of us could go and, if we needed to reef the sail or whatnot, we just take turns going up and doing the sail changes. So really, as far as the handling of the boat, it didn't change much because it was, we were pretty adept at just doing things on our own beforehand. So it's more just kind of, more, not having the company. The other thing is watches. Obviously you can't keep watch quite as well. Luckily, in that realm of the ocean, there isn't really a lot of shipping. We really encountered very few, big commercial vessels and whatnot. So otherwise, but that is an added danger. And now, and probably even back then, but we just couldn't afford it. You've got the technology that can assist with single handing. Having a radar or the receivers that detect the radar of other boats and can alert you. But,
cool. So that was your first big adventure for 5 years, and that kind of got you going on the stuff,
I sold the boat in Papua New Guinea, and at the time I was thinking, I was just going to take a hiatus and eventually go to university and study something. But so with that, I thought, well, I'll do one more journey before I go back to school, and an area I was fascinated with was the Amazon. So I organized an expedition with a couple of good friends to raft the Amazon from its source to the sea, and just one thing led to the other. With that, I wrote a book, and we created a film on it, and I started thinking, maybe I could make a career out of this.
Yeah, cool.
That's
Well, it looks like you're eating, and you got some decent clothes on, so you must be paying the bills.
It's worked out really well. I mean, now we've also got the sideline rowboat business, which is another interesting. I mean, that's a neat thing with our business. It is very diverse. There's so many. There's the writing, which is sort of the main bread and butter, and but we also do speaking, corporate motivational speaking. There's a lot of analogies we can draw. Being in a rowboat in a hurricane, and in the business world, of course, you have those big chaotic things, like of course the recent financial crisis. So how do you deal with that kind of thing? But
Right.
it's the nice thing I like about it is very creative. It allows you to live in your imagination, which I think is always important if you can, as opposed to just a linear thought process, crunching numbers, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So what's your next big adventure, Colin?
Next big adventure is going to be the race to Alaska.
Okay, very cool.
So,
So
yeah.
let's talk about that for a few minutes.
So, well, I'm very excited about that. That's organized here in Port Townsend, and is going to be going all the way up to Ketchikan, Alaska. And the thing I love about it, it's very simple. Not a lot of rules. It's just no engine. Everything else is kind of open, so you can use sails. You can row, and of course, because it's the winds are not very reliable at all. It's very fickle, so that a lot of people are wondering, what is going to be the ideal boat for this race? If you
Is that true the whole way up, pretty much?
it is
a little more predictable in the open areas.
Yeah, I mean, if you
possibly?
get farther out offshore or just out in the open waters, I'm sure it is a little bit more. It definitely is a little bit more wind out there. So the question is whether a high performance sailboat that basically does nothing but sail, or more of a smaller boat that's a combination rowing and sailing is going to have the advantage. And I think it really comes down to the conditions for that year, because it's if you look at the statistics, you can see that it is very variable. The big thing, I mean, for a performance boat, the worst thing is going to be dead calm. I mean, even headwinds, they're going to do fairly well, while everyone else is going to be struggling probably all the more. So,
Yeah.
But it's I think the nice thing about that race is it's getting a lot of people talking and thinking and sort of really embracing creativity as far as the thoughts going into what's going to be required to go. It's distance wise, it's I think about 700 miles, and you've got the choice. You can go on the outside for much of it. The course does. You can go potentially in the inside passage for almost all of it. So you can go in the more sheltered waters if you think your craft or your skill level or whatnot will favor that, or you can go on the outside. And,
So if you go on the outside, though, you still have to hit the waypins.
yeah,
on
there's
the
two
inside.
waypoints. So one is in Seymour Narrows, so you wouldn't be able to go on the outside of Vancouver Island. The other is in Bella Bella. You have to go in the passage in front of Bella Bella on the inside. So it would require, and the idea behind that, of course, is to make it so that, to reduce the chances of just a performance boat being able to go straight out the Juan de Fuca Strait and go way out and just sail, and then come back in at the end, which I think is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you think there'll be some people doing that?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean,
But that would be as long as you hit the waypoints.
yeah, as long as you hit the waypoints,
You're okay.
it would be okay. Yeah. The question is whether or not I think they potentially could. Now, what they've the other idea behind the waypoints is, if you're going through Seymour Narrows, it's a little bit sketchy if you're in a big high-performance sailing boat without an engine. You can't even have an engine on board, which is a great idea, because what people might do is, if everything's going well, just keep it off. If they need to use the engine, well, they just turn it on for safety, and then they pull out of the race. So that'll help dissuade people from trying it when there's a risk that, so the idea being that, somebody with a really high performance sailboat might not want to take that risk of
I see.
going
Yeah.
through Seymour Narrows and getting into trouble and not being able to
So
pull out of it.
Seymour Narrows, I'm assuming, is a very narrow passage.
It's narrow,
It is
and there's
high flow.
heavy tidal action. It goes up to about 12 knots at peak flow. So it's
Kind
extremely
of like
fast flow.
Deception Pass. Are you familiar with Deception Pass? On Whidbey Island.
I'm very familiar with that. So
Yeah.
similar to that, but even more powerful, because basically
Yeah.
you've got it's wider than that, and you've got all the water from the Georgia Strait just being funneled through there. So it's a huge,
pretty
vast amount of water going through a narrow passage.
The water's going 12 knots.
Yeah. Now, there used to be a rock right in the middle, too, called Ripple Rock, and Captain Cook labeled it one of the vilest stretches of water in the world, because what happened is, and a lot of ships were wrecked in that rock. They would, it'd be just pulled along by the current. There's whirlpools and upwellings, and then pushed onto the rock, and that's it. They ended up blowing that rock up as the largest non-nuclear explosion at the time.
Seriously?
1958. They made a tunnel from mainland Vancouver Island, drilled it out under the rock, and then just packed it full of explosives. Great picture of that. Just,
really?
yeah, it's just a huge explosion. So that was the end of Ripple Rock. But it still is, it's still... most people, I mean, it's not, I think there's almost myths surrounding it, like the fears around Seymour Narrows. It's not quite as bad as people make out. I went through there, I can't remember what the current was. It was the peak current, peak flow for whatever the tidal cycle was when it was going around Vancouver Island trying to break the speed record, and because I wanted to maximize all the currents, have Mother Nature working with me. It was a little daunting, whirlpools opening up and huge upwellings, and you can see a big curve, a glassy, smooth curve that the water is coming down, and then you start getting the turbulence. But I think for the most part, you can go through there, especially with a larger boat. If you have a lot of flotation, you're probably going to be all right. But I guess the idea with the sailboat, if you don't have any control, if you don't have any way apart from the current pushing you along, is you could easily get pushed up against the rock walls and the sides.
So you pretty much have to go through there with the tide, right?
Well, you can do slack. It's only a few hundred yards.
Okay, yeah.
The length of Seymour Narrows, so you could go a complete slack.
Slack.
So, yeah, I mean slack doesn't last for long, but of course both sides. When it starts moving, it's not very fast. So
yeah, right.
So
okay.
yeah,
very cool. So you're planning on entering the race. Yeah? And
yeah.
You're going to do it with your wife, Julie?
No, actually, because we've got two little ones now. We've got a newborn who's 2.5 months old.
Oh, I didn't know that. Congratulations.
Thank you, yeah. So it'll be just, we don't want to leave them on their own for that period of time.
Yeah,
so the fellow I'm doing it with, he's lives in Oklahoma. He's actually a really interesting guy. He's 62, but he's super fit. He, at the age of 59, set the world record for the most chin-ups in a day for any age category. So,
are you serious?
And he's a scientist, and what his sort of his hobby is kind of researching, just health. How to maintain your health into old age. And he's a very dedicated guy. He's like one of the most determined guys I know. He just goes. And I've done quite a bit of rowing with him. We rowed together from Whitehorse to Dawson City, breaking the speed record for the non-stop boat. We're using a little Oxford wherry, one person rowing, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. So it'll be very similar to what we'll be doing going up to Alaska.
What's his name?
His name is Steve Price. So
okay.
Yeah, and
wow, how'd you meet him?
The first row cruiser I created was for him. So he contacted me, and he was getting into rowing, and he said, would you be interested in designing a boat that you can actually camp in? And because I like the idea of, when I'm training, at the end of the day, drop the anchor and spend the night somewhere without the hassle of setting up a tent. So I'd actually been thinking of a boat just like that for years and years and years, thinking that'd be great. The whole problem with human power and having a kind of a liveaboard is it's so easy to go overboard with the kind of living quarters and having a bulbous, heavy boat that's not good into the wind. So I was kind of thinking of how to miniaturize it all, but to have a realistic bed that you can comfortably sit in and a little cockpit. And so when he asked me that, I'm like, yeah, sure, I could do that. So I built the boat for him, and through that process, we're in close communication as I was building the boat, and then after we did a trial run together, I just got to know him and we became friends.
So you guys are going to do the race together?
Yeah.
In a row cruiser type?
In a row cruiser, yeah. Initially I was thinking of modifying the one that I built for him, but the more I've been thinking, little changes and modifications I want to make, I've been thinking it's probably going to be much smarter just to build a whole new one and have another boat out of it. So
why not get another boat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you going to put sails on it?
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be one of the big modifications, is putting in a sailing rig. It's going to be a catch rig. So there'll be a sail. The important thing is that the sails don't interfere with the rowing station, and that they can also be stowed right away, so you don't have any additional windage or whatnot when you want to just row. And quick, easy. But initially I was thinking just a downwind rig, but the more I thought about it, I was thinking if you're going to have the sailing apparatus, you may as well go to that extra, effort and have something that actually sails reasonably well. Obviously, it's not going to be great performance, but something that can, angle a little more into the wind so we're going to have a dagger board and not a lee board, because I just think, with the amount of, I think sometimes people find a dagger board kind of daunting, putting a hole in the bottom of the boat or whatnot, but really it's pure simplicity, and it is easier, less weight, everything else. So there'll be a dagger board and then a little
too, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can make quite a lightweight thing, and the drag you're going to create, when you don't have the center, when you're not using it, won't be that great. I think the benefits that we'll achieve from being able to sail.
And the drag is just the hole in the bottom for the.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And then I'm getting more and more complex in my thoughts. I'm not sure if I'll do all of them, but I was thinking it'd be really nice to have a little tiller pilot. So you've got the rudder in the back. The cockpit isn't in the stern of the boat. It's sort of forward a bit, so you're not going to be able to have a direct tiller, but having a mechanism. And again, I'm trying to simplify things and make them more complex with, of course, these electronic. But as far as the actual steering mechanism, instead of us thinking maybe line cables going around or hydraulic, but I think, to make it as simple as possible, just have a tube going through that aft compartment, and then a rod going through, and then have a little side tiller, and then so
you have a gear on it that would turn the.
It would basically there'd be a little tiller coming off the rudder in the back, a side tiller,
just push it,
and then a little, I don't know how to describe it, a thing that slides, because obviously when it goes like that, it's the rod's going to do a little bit of that. So unless you have a big tube, to have a smaller tube, you want to have it so that slides on the tiller as it does that, and then have a corresponding tiller there. So basically have a backup system if you need to steer or whatnot. You can when you're sailing. But the main means of steering would be with the tiller pilot, which would make it so easy, whether you're rowing or sailing. Obviously, you need the electrical system to supply that, so solar panels and either lead acid or lithium ion, ideally, but it gets more costly, but lighter, to hold that supply. And the other thing I'm thinking maybe, and I'll have to talk with Jake to see whether or not it's allowed, having motors. I mean, I guess even the tiller pilot has a little motor in it, but having bilge pumps, electric bilge pumps, and 3 water ballast compartments. So one in the bottom just for being ballast when you're sailing, and then 2 side ones, so you can actually counter. They have them in racing sailboats because it's a narrower beam boat. There's only so much you can hike out. It'd be nice to have that extra bit of
keep yourself assistance. A little more flat.
Yeah, exactly. So you can actually row in light winds. You can row, keep the boat balanced.
So you get sail-assisted rowing in light winds?
Exactly, So
wow, that sounds interesting.
And then so it'd just be 3 different switches for each compartment. You flip it on and pumps it out, and nice and simple, as opposed to having to hand pump when you're already exhausted. And bilge pumps are very reliable, so it's just a matter of having that electrical system.
Wow, cool.
Robust.
So what's your best estimate of how long it'll take for winter to get up there?
I really don't know. I'm sort of
range.
I'm thinking what I'm thinking for us is maybe 10 days. But whether as to the winners, I think if there's a sailboat doing it, a high performance sailboat, and it just happened to have winds all the way up, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days potentially. Not very likely, but I think it could. If they had the winds in the boat, it could be very fast. But I'd say realistically, probably 9 to 15. Maybe 9 to 15 days, because if there's really heavy headwinds and we don't really have any, which you can have in the Johnston Strait and further up, and you don't have the high performance sailing craft, I think it could take quite some time to.
Are the prevailing winds that time of year going to be headwinds typically, or
most
of the way, or how does that?
No,
work?
it's the thing. It's there really aren't prevailing winds. They can come when you have a high pressure in place. Generally, they're coming from the north, and then when you have a low pressure, they're coming from the south.
I see.
And in the summer, north winds are more predominant because you have the nicer weather, and so a lot of north. It can really roar through the Johnston Strait, on your nose. But that's one of the things I kind of like about it being sort of between seasons, between the spring southerlies and winter southerlies, and the summer. So I think you'll get quite a mix. A lot of calms, a lot of headwinds, tailwinds. The mix, so
that keeps everybody kind of up in the air. What's gonna happen.
It could vary so much. I mean, you might just happen to have a big high pressure coming in, and headwinds for a week, so you just can't predict in advance what you're going to be facing.
Yeah, interesting. So with the little road cruiser with the sailing rig on it, theoretically a boat has a maximum hull speed. Whether it's under human power or sail power, is that right?
Yeah, well, generally with the under human power, when we're doing long distances like that, we're not really concerned about the hull speed because you're never approaching the hull speed. The hull speed is more of a concern when you're sprinting with rowing, because you're always going to be generally well below the hull speed. So to give you a good example, we've got two smaller boats. One's the Oxford Wherry, which is just under 16 feet. It's very light. It's 53 pounds. It's an open boat, very pretty boat, but it is designed for speed. And then we've got an expedition boat, which is 18 feet. It's quite a bit heavier. Now, if you're doing a sprint between the two boats, and the Oxford Wherry also has a rounder hull, so probably theoretically a little more efficient. If you're doing a sprint, you will win with the expedition because you have that extra waterline length. But if you're going all day, you'll win with the Oxford Wherry because it's a much lighter boat, less wetted area, and you're not pushing that hull speed threshold anymore. So for long distance cruising, it's fun. When we went down the Yukon River trying to break the speed record, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, that's a pretty short boat because it's 15 feet 10 inches." And I was like, "Yeah, it doesn't matter because I'd rather have a light boat that's easy to move at 4 or 5 knots than a heavier boat that sure you can sprint faster, but you're not going to be able to maintain that."
Interesting.
But when you're sailing, you will, of course, having a longer hull and you've got a good wind will be an advantage because the wind could really be pushing you along. But the road cruiser is almost 19 feet, so it'll have a reasonable hull speed. So when you've got favorable winds, but of course, 35, 40 footer is going to be a whole lot more with the performance. A performance sailboat of that size could really get some.
And that's a single station sliding seat.
It is, and single station is definitely advantageous because and that's another thing that can be confusing. People think that having two sliding seat systems would be faster, two people rowing together, but not at all because realistically a human can only do 10 to 12 hours a day of rowing. So if you're going together for 10 to 12 hours, you're going to be maybe going about 20% faster. But if you're rowing individually for 24 hours a day, taking 2-hour shifts, you're going to do 100% faster or farther.
So it's much more efficient to do it that way.
Much more efficient.
Interesting.
It's like when Julie and I rowed across the Atlantic Ocean, the boat that we had, it was an ocean rowboat, did have 2 rowing stations, but really you're only using one at a time. Again, same for efficiency. It's just one person going, one person off.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast today, Colin, and best of luck to you, and keep me posted on your road cruiser and all the amenities there. That sounds really fun.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's just, it's been so fun being here at the Wooden Boat Festival. It's just the perfect weekend. Is this the first year you've been here?
No,
we were here last year, too.
Oh, you were?
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So, Very good. Well, best of luck to you.
Well, thank you so much. All right. Take care. All right.
Thanks, Colin, for doing the interview. It was awesome to hook up again at the festival. It's fun to kind of get to know you, and we definitely have a lot in common, except for we don't have something in common like a human circumnavigation of the world and rowing around Vancouver Island and so on. Those are things you've done that I haven't and probably never will, but that's okay. If you'd like to connect with me, you can do so by email. My email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. And I would encourage you to check out my YouTube channel for Wooden Boat Dan. I believe it's youtube.com/woodenboatdan. And if you go there, I just uploaded a new video that I took this summer during the Scamp Camp in Port Townsend, Washington at the Northwest Maritime Center, where they were steaming a 16-foot piece of Alaska yellow cedar and wrapping around the sheer strake of a scamp to be the carlin and the gunnel. 2 pieces, 1 piece for each of those. So it's a pretty cool video, so check that out. Send me pictures and stories if you'd like, or you can leave a voicemail for me from my website if you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/voicemail. Or if you just go to my homepage, there's a little button on the side you can click on to leave a 90-second message, audio message from your computer with a microphone or even from your smartphone. And I would really appreciate it if you would do that. If you make purchases at Amazon, especially this time of year with the holidays coming up, I would really appreciate it if you'd use a link that I give you. Your products will cost the same, but I will get paid a small commission, which helps support the podcast. There are costs of doing this. And that link is hookedonwoodenboats.com/Amazon. Again, if you go through that link and then make your purchase, I get paid a 4% commission. I really appreciate that. hookedonwoodenboats.com/Amazon. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. If you go to the iTunes store to the podcast section, search for Hooked on Wooden Boats. You can subscribe there. You can also leave a review. I've got quite a few 5-star reviews, and I always appreciate your feedback. I've also got a store through Cafe Press where you can buy hats, t-shirts, mugs, sandals, things like that. Coffee cups with the Hooked on Wooden Boats logo. If you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/store, that'll take you to the store and you can make a purchases. So it's be a great gift for somebody. Something fun, helps support the podcast. I make a couple bucks per item, which helps. Every little bit helps. I appreciate that. Well, I hope you have a great week, folks, and you have a blessed Thanksgiving next week. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan. Now, I wasn't going to say over and out, but since next Thursday is a holiday, if I don't do a podcast next week, usually I publish on Thursday, I will come in with a podcast the following week. So I'll either have one, episode number 151 next week or the week after. So thanks for tuning in, folks, and we'll talk later. God bless. Wooden Boat Dan over and out.